Now, Beverly, Nancy Pelosi's comments were actually made in private as a way of holding off Jerry Nadler and the pro-impeachment forces, but aren't the odds about 1,000,000 to 1 that she didn't realize this would leak and leak quickly?
I think it was purposeful on her part, and the reason is when she has almost 60 members in her caucus that want to move forward with impeachment, she's really trying to tamp that down because impeachment is not going to be good for the Democrats for a variety of reasons. So what I think she's doing with this messaging and having this so-called leak is to show that she's in solidarity with her caucus on their opinion of the president while trying to distance herself from the tactic of impeachment.
Clarence, what the president's detractors in the media are suggesting is that when he spoke to Laura Ingraham and he told her that the interview was delaying the D-Day ceremonies, whether that turned out to be true was not clear, is that if he's slamming Nancy Pelosi and Robert Mueller in that 1 minute, somehow he couldn't have been sincere in delivering the D-Day tribute roughly an hour later.
I don't think it reflected on his delivery of the D-Day tribute. I think, as you just heard one critic say, he had the graves of the D-Day casualties behind him.
So the optics bothered you?
That bothered me, and I think it should bother people on Trump's team because it does not show the proper tribute at the time, the 75th anniversary of D-Day. You know, I'm one of those draftees who couldn't afford a doctor to find bone spurs in my feet, and it took me a long time to get over my resentment of those folks who did, and I don't think Donald Trump has gotten over it yet, and you really see this.
Well, let's talk about some of the other skirmishes, I guess, for lack of a better word, that really defined the coverage this week. So when he went after Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, a couple days before the president landed, Khan had actually written an op-ed piece in The Guardian. This sort of got lost, saying it's so un-British to be rolling out the red carpet for this guy. His divisive behavior flies in the face of the ideals America was founded on. And the president goes on Twitter, calls him a stone-cold loser, and was asked about it on Sky News.
Do you think that Sadiq Khan is a stone-cold loser?
Well, I think he's been a not very good mayor, from what I understand. He's done a poor job. Crime is up, a lot of problems. And I don't think he should be criticizing a representative of the United States that can do so much good for the United Kingdom.
That was obviously a reporter for Sky. So, Guy, the headlines mostly said Trump attacks London's mayor as if that was the first blow.
It was a retaliation, and Mayor Khan was making the case Trump's a bigot and shouldn't be welcome here at all as the American president. So, again, we know how President Trump operates. I think he was rightfully upset by what the mayor said, and of course he's going to fire back. I mean, the idea that we were all clutching at our pearls, oh my gosh, Trump attacked the mayor of London. Look what was said about him. Think about what we've learned for the last, I don't know, 5 decades of Donald Trump's adult life. This is, of course, what he was going to do, and I think in this case it was probably warranted.
And Clarence, it's one thing for critics to say, well, you know, Trump could have been focused on the big international problems and just kind of look past that. And that's not who Donald Trump is if you criticize him harshly.
That's right. And we knew that when he was elected. At the same time, we don't need to normalize it. I like the old days when American presidents went overseas and paid proper tribute at D-Day. I was not a friend of Ronald Reagan's politics, but I love that speech he gave at Point de Hoc. You know, these are the kind of things that we expect of real leadership in the country. And, you know, the public has the right to elect, to vote for or against the kind of president who represents them the way they like.
And then there is the Duchess of Sussex. So the whole Meghan Markle thing, the president had given an interview to The Sun. This was on tape. He was asked about, she had once said she'd move to Canada if he was elected. He said, I didn't know she was that nasty. Then he denied it. And this came up with Piers Morgan on ITV because obviously this was a very big story in Britain. Roll it.
CNN and some of the other phonies, they went out and they took the tape and they even tried to, you know, disgorge it from that. So what happens is they talked about nasty, but we were talking about nasty. She was nasty to me, and that's okay for her to be nasty. It's not good for me to be nasty to her, and I wasn't.
So it was all this media hand-wringing. He's lying. He's gaslighting. He did say nasty. What he's explaining is he meant that she had been nasty. In his mind, that's not the same as saying she is a nasty person.
Well, I think when you have to explain, you're usually losing. So him saying how he was using the term nasty, and also this isn't the only time we've heard the term nasty even on your show today. He also said that in reference to Nancy Pelosi. So I think it's his favorite word of choice in relation to women specifically. So once again, we could say that we don't want Donald Donald Trump to talk this way. He's going to do it. I'm not going to hold my breath. But this story didn't help him out at all. I think it's fair to cover it.
Okay, let's sort of pull back and take the 30,000-foot view. So the president carried out his duties pretty well, I would say, overall. I mean, he had dinner with the Queen. He wore a white tie. He chatted with Prince Charles about climate change. He didn't use the wrong fork. He gave a pretty good D-Day address, even according to some of his critics. And yet the tone of the coverage was, well, he's exaggerating the size of his crowds, or he's minimizing the size of the protests. And these spats and what critics in the media say are his screw-ups and missteps.
Well, I mean, many in the media are invested in his failure. So they're going to find narratives that further that failure in their minds and cover that and focus on it. Does the
president help them?
Yeah, of course he does sometimes. Yeah. Of course he does sometimes. Yeah. And that's part of my consistent critique of him for the balance of his entire presidency thus far, and will be, I think, for the next year and a half. That being said, you have to look at the totality of the trip, which I think overall was absolutely a success. The fact that it was treated as such and covered as such by the foreign press, which is not exactly a group of Trump lovers, I think is very telling. And particularly the speech that he gave in Normandy was extraordinary. It was a very, very well-crafted and delivered speech that really rose to that moment that even Jim Acosta made that point. And to get Jim Acosta to say something nice about the president is, I felt like I saw a pig fly by the window behind me.
And even Joe Scarborough said it was the best speech of Trump's presidency, and he's hardly a Trump booster these days. So I wonder whether the Beltway press is sort of stuck in this traditional mindset, which is you have a president, and maybe this reflects our culture, who ping-pongs between high and low. He's sticking it to Nancy Pelosi. He's talking about Meghan Markle. He's talking about Bette Midler, who also criticized him, and he went back against her. And it was, oh, my God, how can he do this when he's in London or when he's in France? And yet, he's also carrying out the duties of commander-in-chief.
You didn't mention Rosie O'Donnell, by the way, so maybe things are changing. Yeah. No, things aren't changing. This is Donald Trump. And again, we do this from the beginning. The coverage has been like coverage always is. The professional news people covered both sides. They gave, they broadcast the speeches, etc. Commentators commented. And the viewers picked and chose what they remember and what they don't. But Donald Trump didn't just stop with nasty on Nancy Pelosi. Nasty, vindictive, horrible, and the kind of person who, disgusting. I forgot. I'm a disgrace. I forgot that part. Yeah. And that she doesn't negotiate. I mean, who walked out of the last negotiation in regard to infrastructure? It was Donald Trump. So,
right, but that was also, interestingly, in response to a comment Pelosi had made to her fellow Democrats about a cover-up. So she has a way of getting under her skin. He hits back. And the headlines often say, Trump denounces Pelosi. Now, the president, let's give him some equal time, has been tweeting. No shock there. Yesterday, Beverly, he tweeted, watched MSNBC to see what the opposition says. Such lies. No wonder their ratings, along with CNN, are way down. The hatred Comcast has is amazing, the parent company, of course. This morning, President added again, this is interesting, I know it is not at all presidential to hit back at the corrupt media, but if you don't hit back, people will believe the fake news is true. And that seemed to be a little bit of a bow to the criticism that he's often bashing the press, even if it steps on his message.
And I think it's valid criticism at times. So even going back to the D-Day speech, I'm glad that there were people who talked about it being a good speech, but a lot of the coverage was on things that he didn't even do that were incorrect. For example, they talked about he was the one who delayed the start of the ceremony. The reports it was actually the French president, and also where he signed his name on a joint letter with his allies. So these are those minor instances that happen.
But what do you make
in
of
a
him
longer
saying,
day.
I know it is not at all presidential?
Well, I don't think Donald Trump wants to be presidential. I looked at that speech. I was like, oh, if he would only do this all the time. And I think a lot of us think that. But this is his style. This is the way he's going to approach it. I actually think it would be better for people to not take his bait. I think it's when the others retaliate that it actually plays poorly on them.
I just thought it was an interesting nod to the criticism that he